The worst case scenario is quite a wet start, drives early infections, you get bigger biomass, so therefore you have a lot more crop to support during grain fill, and that's when if you get the stress you'll get a lot more expression of whiteheads and a lot more yield loss from this disease. Crown rot's a fungal pathogen, and it's actually stubble borne, so what that means is it survives inside the residue of previous cereal crops. It can also get into grass weeds as well. That's got implications, and it's become a big issue for us as the cropping system's changed over the last 20 odd years, and we've gone to a lot more no-till and stubble retention farming systems to conserve that moisture for cropping. We've also brought along a lot higher levels of this stubble borne pathogen with it. All our winter cereals are susceptible, so it does get into oats, but the main ones we talk about are bread wheat varieties and barley. So in a durum variety, in a worst case scenario, you can end up with 80–90% yield loss, and whereas you come back into the bread wheats, that probably restricted around that 40 to 60%. And the best of the bread wheats we're finding, have a yield advantage of around that half a tonne per hectare over, more susceptible bread wheat varieties, and that's much bigger compared to a durum. So that is one of the things. Like, certainly if you've got high crown rot levels, we do not recommend putting a winter cereal into that situation, but there is situations where we don't get the decomposition of the cereal stubble, you don't get the breakdown in dry years, you've still got high inoculant loads, you have to grow a cereal. That's where we recommend it going into a barley variety or one of these more tolerant bread wheat varieties. Certainly from around tilling onwards, if you're looking closely, you can see browning of the outer leaf sheaths right at the base of the plant, and that infection progresses during the season through to the true stem, and you get this characteristic basal browning. So that's very indicative of, or very characteristic I should say, of crown rot. And then what happens from there in terms of yield loss and expression of the disease is related to moisture and temperature stress during grain fill. So if we get that stress, you actually get the fungus block the base of the plant up, and you get those whiteheads form which have either shriveled grain or no grain at all. So growers are quite used to looking for whiteheads in paddocks, but they tend not to go a bit deeper and go to the base of the plant and look for that browning. Just don't assume because you've got a whitehead that it is crown rot. There are other causes of whiteheads or deadheads within crops. Mice chewing or insects chewing the stem will restrict water flow as well. So if it is crown rot, you take that individual tiller with a whitehead, trace it down to the base, it'll always have that characteristic basal browning if it's crown rot, and that is pretty much definitive for crown rot. Nothing else causes that level of browning. If you're still unsure, you can send samples into a pathologist and get it identified, so we'd then go and plate that fungus out on laboratory media, and we get a definitive diagnosis that way. Another method that growers can use is a DNA-based soil test called Predictor B, which is offered out of the South Australian Department in Adelaide, Sardi, and that's where you can determine levels of crown rot, but also other pathogens such as root lesion nematodes in your soil.